Have you ever stopped to think, is all this sci-fi tech even possible? I've often thought about it in terms of what is possible, what is not possible. Well, we can't really know for certain on any of it, but let's talk about it. So I'm just gonna beam up to my sci-fi lab and I'll be right back. Alright, let's talk about science fiction technology. But before we get into it, make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe, and don't forget, after watching this video, tell me what you think of these science fiction technologies and their probability. This is a Other Bookish Things video, so this is all about technology in science fiction and how probable do I think it is. Now, this is a completely arbitrary rating. Definitely it is not based on my expertise by any means. And I do rate each of these technologies on a scale of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, 0 being completely impossible, not likely, ain't gonna happen, to number 10 being it's already happened, it's here, it's technology, it's not science fiction anymore, but can still be used in a fiction story, which in my opinion would still qualify it as science fiction. Alright, so the first technology on my list is going to be transporter technology or teleportation. We see this in such classic shows such as Star Trek. This is where it's probably most predominant and most well known, the transporters from Star Trek. Now, of course, this technology, in my opinion, alongside things like replicators in Star Trek, which kind of go hand in hand, and the similar base technology in the Trek universe, in my opinion, this is simply not a possible technology. And I would say that it's not completely impossible because as far as I know, there's nothing in the laws of physics which expressly forbid transporter technology from ever existing. Principles in quantum mechanics such as quantum entanglement certainly suggest that it's supposedly within the realm of physics possibility. However, I would say that it's pretty darn unlikely that transporter technology in any realistic sense will ever exist. So I'm ranking that as a 1, only because I don't think that transporter technology is expressly banned in the laws of physics. It's just extremely unlikely this technology can ever realistically be developed in any sense. Although it's a great time saver when it comes to away missions and all kinds of cool stuff in Star Trek, that's for sure. Next up on the list is the time travel. So we see this in such classic as H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. So this is a classic science fiction trope that is used in technology that is used. It also appears in shows like Doctor Who. But time travel, the idea of traveling through time to the future or to the past, makes for a really interesting story, and definitely we see this in other works of literature as well, such as Michael Crichton's Timeline. These are some fascinating ideas within the science fiction realm that I think are just some great ideas that could tell some wonderful stories. But in terms of probability, I don't think time travel is going to be something that's super realistic. That being said, it isn't impossible by the laws of physics. Based on quantum mechanics, when you go fast, time slows down for you. So the closer to the speed of light you are, the slower time moves relative to you. Which in effect is, in a way, time travel. Of course, traveling back in time is a little bit harder. But ultimately, I think time travel is probably a lot more realistic than things like transporters. But at the end of the day, time travel is a great science fiction trope. I love time travel stories. I think they could be really cool and well done. But in terms of overall probability, I give this a 3 out of 10 in terms of the probability, simply because it is technically possible to time travel. I just don't think we're ever going to realistically implement it, or it's ever going to be practical in any realistic sense. Next up on the list is genetic engineering. We see this in such great stories as Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So the idea of engineering things to a specific genetic code for whatever reason, whether that's disease resistance, breeding superhumans in a superhuman army and super intelligence, to CRISPR babies and designer babies, genetic engineering isn't just a probability, it is a realistic technology that exists today, albeit not on the scales we typically see within the science fiction world. There's still a lot of ethics and moral questions surrounding genetic engineering and the potential ramifications of that, especially when we scale it up to designer babies and people and humans. But overall, genetic engineering is absolutely a realistic technology that exists today. As for whether it will ever be implemented on a human-wide scale to genetically engineer a custom-built designer baby, that's something that realistically we probably will see at some point. whatever side of the equation you're on, we'll probably see it at some point. So I'm giving this a 9.5 out of 10 in terms of probability genetic engineering, just because it's already happening on non-human life forms and will eventually cross over into a more widespread use within humans themselves. I have no doubt about that. Next up on my list, warp drive and faster than light communications. So we see this often in shows like Star Wars and Star Wars books. They talk about light speed, but really the time it takes to travel between worlds in the Star Wars universe, logically they'd have to be going faster than light speed. Of course, Trek is another example of this with the warp drive, but faster than light travel and faster than light communications is a pretty common thing within the science fiction realm. As for its possibility, well, we already know nothing could really go faster than the speed of light. So, is it possible? Not really. And same thing with communications. This idea that we could communicate instantly across space and time, I think is pretty far-fetched as well. Of course, going back things like quantum entanglement, maybe it really will happen one day. I don't know. But I don't think it's very possible at all to go faster than the speed of light, or even realistically to actually accelerate any object with mass to the speed of light. So I'm giving this a 0.1 out of 10, just because I always err on the side of impossible. I don't think anything is necessarily impossible, just extremely, extremely unlikely. Next up on the list, we have artificial intelligence, which goes right along with androids. We all know we have our favorite lovable android. My personal favorite lovable android is Mr. Data from Star Trek. He is definitely one of my favorite lovable androids, but in terms of literature, we have, of course, Isaac Asimov's I, Robot series is a classic example of a lovable android from science fiction. This is absolutely a possibility. It's not just a possibility. I think that we're getting pretty close to this kind of technology existing in reality. We already have artificial intelligence with so many different things within our lives already. That algorithm, I mean, looking at algorithm with things like Netflix and that kind of thing, recommending you content. That's kind of a, preliminary artificial intelligence, I guess the best way to put that. But also there's AI and artificial intelligence and a variety of things. We got the bots online when you do web chats. A lot of time there are bots for that, which are kind of an artificial intelligence type thing. And of course we do have robots. So putting that artificial intelligence into a robot, androids, these things are absolutely possible. And I would definitely rank these very, very high on the probability of this happening. So I'm going to give that a 9.5 out of 10 because we all know this is coming, and in some respects it's already here. So artificial intelligence and androids, 100% reality. Next up on my list, terraforming. This is the idea of changing an uninhabitable world into a habitable one. We of course see this quite a bit with The Expanse is a great example of that, where Mars has been colonized and the Martians project, their aim, their ambition is to terraform Mars and turn it into a habitable world. And this is something they've been working on for the past 100 or 200 years or however long they've been there in The Expanse. But terraforming and turning a world into a habitable world. Terraforming is a long process and takes a lot of work, a lot of energy, and a lot of resources. In terms of possibilities, I think it's absolutely possible to terraform. The technology and the theoretical ideas behind how to do it. There's lots of theories flying around about how to terraform Mars and all kinds of stuff, and it's absolutely possible. For this, I would definitely give it a 7 out of 10 because I do think one day we will accomplish it, probably, but it's so far off that right now in terms of possibility, it's definitely not impossible. It's technologically possible. It's just developing the technology to the point where it becomes effective and a good use of resources. But one day, I'm sure that we'll get at terraforming. Next up on the list is artificial gravity. Now, there's a few ways to accomplish this. I know Ender's Game on the space station, they have in Ender's Game, there's artificial gravity there, except in the battle room where it's a zero-G battle room, but otherwise it's artificial gravity, often utilized through the processes like spin gravity or thrust gravity. So spinning, when you rotate the station in a circle, creating that artificial gravity, centrifugal force essentially. With a thrust gravity, where it's the acceleration of the ship that you're in, increasing your gravitational force or mimicking gravity at the very least. So artificial gravity is definitely possible within the realm of technology. We haven't built any spaceships or contraptions yet to mimic artificial gravity, but it certainly doesn't mean that it's not possible. There's lots of ideas of how to achieve this effectively in terms of long-term spaceflight. I know there's been talk about a manned mission to Mars and kind of creating an artificial gravity within that. So that is definitely a possibility. I put this as a 9 out of 10 because we know how to do it. The trick is implementing it, but we do know how to do and create artificial gravity. Next up on my list is the Dyson Sphere. So this was an idea first proposed by physicist Freeman Dyson. The idea being you build a megastructure around a star to harness all the energy of that star. But the possibilities of this happening, like this is just such a massive idea, massive construction project, that it would take the resources of an entire solar system or more just to be able to build a Dyson Sphere in and of itself. I think one of the best literary examples is Ringworld with regard to the Dyson Sphere. Now, Ringworld itself wasn't a sphere, but it was a ring around a star, still harnessing a good significant chunk of that star's energy, but the concept is there nonetheless within Larry Niven's Ringworld of a Dyson Sphere and how that might work. As for the possibility behind a Dyson Sphere, while it is technically possible, I think it's unrealistic to achieve and probably going to take more energy than it's worth in the long run. I just don't think that it's technologically realistic, and I don't think there'd be any benefit to focusing on trying to accomplish that kind of thing. So in terms of Dyson Sphere, I give that a 1 out of 10, just because, yeah, technically it's possible, but I just don't think it's realistic in the long run, in all honesty. So moving on to my next one on the list is cloning. So of course this is absolutely possible, and probably one of the most famous examples of cloning used in science fiction literature is Jurassic Park, where the dinosaurs were cloned and came to life again. Who doesn't like that, right? Cloning Jurassic Park, great work of literature, and it's just a fantastic story, one of my favorite science fiction stories, and it's absolutely possible. We already have Dolly the sheep, that was well known, probably the most famous clone ever. I'm sure other animals have been cloned since then, but everybody knows who Dolly the sheep is. And cloning is absolutely technology that's not only possible, it's been done already. So of course this is a technology that's going to happen. Has happened, is happening now, and who knows how far this technology will come. Whether we ever get to the point of cloning humans is a whole nother matter. I mean, who knows, it might happen one day, and I have no idea what the moral or ethical implications of that are, but hey, it's going to happen one day. So that is definitely a 10 out of 10, because that is like, yeah, it's here, it's happening, it's absolutely happened. Cloning technology, it is real. And then the last one on the list, space mining. We see this in a lot of science fiction literature. Red Rising's got mining colonies throughout the solar system as well, as an example of where we could see some space mining within science fiction literature. Now, space mining isn't the focus of Red Rising, but there are space mining colonies within Red Rising. So it's definitely part of that literature. And space mining, the idea of going out to these asteroids, mining them for the resources and extracting them. We mine on Earth, there's no reason we can't mine in space, and it's definitely technology I think is absolutely possible. Now, developing it to the point where it's worthwhile, worth the investment, we get a return on that investment, that's a whole nother matter altogether, and I think still quite a ways off. But we'll see once we get there how it goes. Eventually, I am confident that space mining will happen. So I give this a 9.5 out of 10, just because we're not there yet, but I see no reason why it wouldn't be possible to begin with. And now for the honorable mentions. So these are things that we see within science fiction that I think deserve an honorable mention, but honestly I just don't think they're actually practical necessarily, or just don't make a lot of sense, but they're still fun ideas to play with. So one of them is this concept of alien-human hybrids. So the mixing of species and, you know, humans having babies with aliens and that kind of thing. And while it's a cool idea, and I honestly think it is a cool idea, I just don't think that's realistically plausible. I mean, eventually we may discover that some aliens exist, and hypothetically, if we ever met aliens, I just can't see it possible that our biochemistry with aliens from another world could possibly be compatible biochemically or genetically to even create an offspring, let alone viable offspring. So I just don't think the idea of an alien-human hybrid is realistically practical, though it is a cool idea. And I love that concept. It's fun to read it within our science fiction stories, but realistically, I just don't think it's plausible or realistic. One of the other fun things with science fiction is wormholes. Wormholes, the hypothetically hole in space to shorten the distance between 2 points in the fabric of space. This is a really cool idea. Love the concept. It's definitely well within the possibilities of the laws of physics. Although traveling through a wormhole, I just don't think it's plausible or realistic, although it's a really cool idea. So definitely I'd say wormholes are well within in the realm of possibility to actually exist, but actually utilizing them for our benefit, just don't think that's going to be possible. And my last honorable mention is Intergalactic Civilizations. This is something that is so common throughout science fiction, from Dune to Isaac Asimov's Foundation, Star Trek, Star Wars. These things are just so common within science fiction literature, and it's entirely a fantastic and awesome idea. I love those space operas with intergalactic civilizations. It's one of my favorite types of science fiction stories. But realistically, with the laws of physics and how the universe works as we know it, the possibility of this ever actually happening in reality, I think, is pretty slim to non-existent. But it's still a really cool concept and idea, so definitely got that under the honorable mentions as well. These honorable mentions, strictly speaking, they're not really science technologies, but they're still really cool concepts and ideas within science fiction. So there you have it. There are 10 science fiction technologies plus some honorable mentions of what we find in literature and what I personally think is and is not possible in this list. What would you have on your list of science fiction technologies? And what do you think is the most possible or most impossible science fiction technologies? I'd love to hear from you. Leave me a comment in the comments down below. And, as always, don't forget to follow me on Bookstagram, join my Discord, check out all the links in the description below, and thank you so much for watching. And as always, until next time, keep on reading. Bye!